Here's the thing. I can't heal you. You can't do everything that I did and have the same outcome. My path is my path alone. However, I can tell you my story in hopes that it will inspire you to know yourself deeper, to connect to your inner divine self, and to remember that you are whole and you are love. The body can heal itself if you get out of your own way. And there are a lot of badass humans living their divine purpose that can share their wisdom and mirror your divine self back to you until you believe and embody it as truth. I'm Brittany Dobbs, and this is Waves of Love. Hi everyone, welcome back to Waves of Love. I'm Brittany Dobbs, and I'm so excited because today we have a little bit of a different type of conversation, and I have a friend, Phoebe Bloomfield, who is here with us today, and I'm going to let Phoebe introduce herself, and then I'll kind of tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Britt. So, hi everyone, I'm Phoebe. I'm from the UK. I live in London specifically, and I've been in Bali for about eight and a half weeks.
Wow.
And I'm coming towards the end of my journey here, and I'm heading back to the UK on Friday.
And Phoebe and I met through a mutual friend, and we met here in Bali. And today, because my journey, obviously Waves of Love, but my journey has been really about all types of love, that I want to talk about like an exploration of what love looks like. And Phoebe and I have had such great conversations around this throughout our time here in Bali. So I thought it would be a wonderful conversation for us to have.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to it and seeing where the conversation goes.
Thanks for coming today.
Problem.
Yep. So let's dive into love. I think the thing is like when I talk about love on this podcast so far, it's really been about, for me, those waves of like deep connection within myself and with something greater than me. So the divine is what I call it. God, universe, whatever that is for other people. But I think like as I've been exploring the concept, I've looked back at all the things that have kind of gone on throughout my journey. And I'm like, really, it's all about love.
Mm.
And I think that's where, because love means different things to different people and who we love in different ways. And so, what is love for you?
Oh, big question. What is love for me? Well, I think sort of most recently, I'd say love has been about turning in. I'm really giving myself some very sort of conscious space around exploring me and the kind of depths of my identity. And that is really one of the big reasons why I decided to sort of come out here to Bali, which is such an incredible spiritual land,
so beautiful, right?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And just really give myself the opportunity to look inward, as I say, and start to explore myself in a deeper way. And I know we'll kind of get into this a little bit more in more detail. But I think it's been such an amazing time to reflect and have a look at that. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, I think we can really get stuck into like the business, the hecticness of life, and, I don't know, like doing all the things, I guess, that is expected of us, that society just sort of like pushes us towards certain things, and actually being able to like pause and take stock and start to explore yourself in a deeper way, I think is really, really special. And it's something that I hope we can all do at points in our lives. So I think, that's kind of how it's starting to show up.
Yeah. I think like the busyness and all of that, where it kind of, for me, that experience has been really sort of a numbing experience where I'm just going through the motions of life. And so in a lot of the episodes, I've talked about that connection to love. But the thing is that it took me a really long time to connect to that feeling, and feel it in such a, I don't want to say like dramatic, but it is a very connected feeling. It is a very strong sensation within my being.
Yeah.
But I know what that is in regards to me being connected to myself and to the divine.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday that I was like, oh, but like, what does it feel like in other senses? You know, like what does it look like in that way? And so that just kind of like dug into a bigger conversation of like, what is love for me? And where did this kind of start for me?
Yeah.
And do you mind if I share a little
bit?
Yeah. Please. So I think, well, why I was mentioning that was because if we talk about love and people are not necessarily like, I don't know how it feels, I don't know what that feels like within me, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good starting point. It's a good place to kind of start digging in. Like, I'll go back to my story, but like, would you say you've kind of always been connected to love?
Oh, it's a great question. I think we can get a bit disassociated with it. I think I've tried to be connected to love, but I think what I was noticing about myself was it was more around maybe servicing sort of others, and that was kind of how it was showing up. And I think I got into that pattern, and when I was sort of so far down the line with that, that I think when people ask me simple questions like, well, how do you feel about that? And what's your kind of opinion on this or that? You know, I really struggled to be able to kind of give that. And I think for me, I'd noticed that I'd just been in other orbits. And I think this opportunity for me was around actually grounding myself and thinking, okay, well, what's Phoebe's orbit and what's her kind of journey going to look like? But I remember when I first sort of came here to Bali, like 2.5 months ago, and I went to a really nice yoga retreat in Canggu. And I remember my first day there and kind of walking around and just like observing how totally serene it was and how like so together and very like almost like inside everyone was. And I was just like, wow, like it blew my mind. I was like, how can there be such like serenity within everybody? And it was kind of hard for me initially to kind of like get my head around that and start to kind of like tune into that. And then I just started to go to, 1 or 2 like yoga classes. I'd never really done it before back home. I'd never got into it in London. But I was like, look, I'm here and I'm in a yoga retreat.
Yeah.
Get into it. And then as I started to do this and I went to like all the different classes, I went to aerial yoga, which was just like wild to me. I loved it. Vinyasa and yin and all these different types of amazing yoga that do things to you that are very, very different, from one class to the next. And I just started noticing like these feelings as well that I was tapping into. And I was like, wow, like I just felt that like the disassociation with my sort of like beings just starting to just like melt away. And then incoming was that kind of like connection to myself. And I was like, okay, this is it. Like I'm really starting to like tap into love now. And that's kind of where it began.
Yeah, I think so. I was going to go a little bit farther back, but my journey was similar in that yoga is what brought me to love myself. I was on that 200-hour retreat, and I've spoken to this before, but it's the idea that like I was connecting to my body, I was connecting to my breath like so frequently for many, many days in a row. And it was like all of a sudden I just had this rush of like love. And I equated it to self-love because of the work that I had been doing before that. It could be equated to many different things, but like for me, that's what connected in that moment. And I was like, oh my God, I've never, ever felt that before, which made me question, like, did I know what love felt like before that? And to be honest, I don't know. I don't know if I did. And so I was reflecting back of like, we're not going to go into like the parental stuff, but my mom does tell a story of like how when I was in utero, she wasn't sure she would be able to love me. I mean, of course she was. It was just this like fear and anxiety that I think she was experiencing. And I'd love to have her on one day and like actually, kind of talk about that kind of stuff. But I think just really the idea of like, if that's how I started this existence, what is like really what is love? Because if I'm going to come into the world unsure of it and then seek it for the rest of my time here. Of course, she always says, like, when I came out, it was just, like, the most love she could have ever felt in her whole life, right? Yeah. But I think those initial thoughts affect who we are and, totally. Like, our creation.
Yeah, totally. I think that's so interesting, Britt, and it feels a little bit like in that kind of, in that experience then, it's almost like you're kind of crafting it for yourself, and you're really kind of exploring it without maybe that basis. Obviously, it sounds like your mum, when you popped out, actually, she was pretty thrilled to have you in the world. But yeah, like it'd be really interesting. Perhaps some of those kind of feelings, they do sort of go inside, and then and that sort of part of you as a little baby. I don't know. It'd be interesting. I think when I reflect on my experience, I think I felt a lot of love as a little baby, for sure. I think my mum, like yours, was really thrilled when I popped out, and she was very, very nurturing. So I think I've kind of had that from the beginning. But I do think that as you move through life, and I'm 36 now, I do think there is quite a chunk of time, particularly between your sort of early 20s and then towards this time frame, actually, where you're really trying to make your way in the world. Work becomes really important. You're like, I've got to climb the career ladder and do this and do that at certain points, and I need to be this level here and all of this kind of stuff. I think it can be really challenging to tune into yourself. And I think when you're in a busy city like London, I know you're in New York, at a sort of similar time period.
Yeah, there was no love within that. I mean, I had so many beautiful people surrounding me, but love wasn't the defining aspect of that experience of my life.
Yeah. And I think I was kind of almost reminded of it recently. I popped over to Singapore for a few days, bit of a visa on, so I could get back to wonderful Bali. But it was a really incredible country to visit. But I think one of the things that I found really challenging was that it basically gave me all the feelings of that big city like London, which is, people working incredibly hard, really sort of like sucked into that bubble. It's a very specific type of existence that is really familiar to me. And it just made me think, wow, when I do go back, work is incredibly important, of course, but I just want to do things a little bit differently and make sure that whatever I do, the practices that I've built while I've been here, I continue with, to really nurture me and love myself when I'm back.
And that's been like, so through this brain injury, that really, what that did was it took away who I thought I was, right? And so then it took away like my work aspect where I got my self-worth. Like all of these things just like fell away. And it's like, if I don't love myself, which I didn't at that point, what else is there? Because everything else comes and goes, And so I think that idea of like doing something different, it's actually been a bit of I don't know if you would say like fear, but it's like if I step back into the things that I was doing before, they're so misaligned now that I like will get sick or something, And so being so conscious of what I put out into the world and the way that I do it is with love, is through love, and is in alignment with this being that I am now. Because I don't think there's another way for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to say there's not a way for everyone else, but like, I don't know everyone's stories, right? Yeah. But for me, I can no longer pretend that there's another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how would you say you started to kind of like tap into that level of understanding? And then I guess like what are some of the things that you've been doing to really express love for yourself?
It's been a slow journey for sure. And there's an episode where I talk about my journey, like with my body. And that's kind of been a theme throughout everything of like, it was really imposed upon me to not love the way that I looked. And then I really took that to heart and have not been able to love this expression. And so I think just like slowly throughout this journey, it's like little at a time, because there's also still days where I look in the mirror and I'm like, it's okay, I love you, but it's like that initial reaction is like, I don't know. Just because we're human, right? And like, that's a lot of the conditioning that's around us. And so just all of these tools that I'm like yoga and meditation, and honestly, like things like doing a belly massage just to connect to this body, because this body is our expression of our soul, right? It's like the instrument. I was having a conversation last night with this guy at this dinner, and he was like, oh, it's like the antenna. And I was like, that's exactly. He was like, so you have to clear the antenna so that the connection is higher to the soul. And I was like, yes, that is exactly what needs to happen. So the more you clear out the antenna, the more you clear out the traumas and the conditioning and the old ways of being, the more you're connected to love, the more you're connected to your soul, the more you're connected to other people. And yeah, just the more love can flow through.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think that's a really nice way of kind of summarizing it and tapping into it. I guess like my feeling is when I think about sort of my friends and things like that, sort of back home that are, like certainly like on a sort of similar path to me, it's almost like, well, what are the nuggets like for them? Like what are the things that they can do in their sort of like everyday hectic busy lives to just nourish themselves? What would you say?
Well, I think what's interesting about that is that we all want like a quick fix. We all want an answer, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you things to do, but that doesn't mean that that's the way that you're going to experience it. Like I know like journaling has been a big thing for me. Meditation has been a big thing for me. Yoga, even just experiencing obviously all the people that I'm also speaking to on this podcast and all their like modalities that have helped heal my body, are ways that we can connect to ourselves. I think for me, a big thing, because it's kind of about knowing you and knowing what fills your own cup. Like what's something that really fills your cup?
I think for me, it's interesting. I just want to go back to the point you made around like quick fixes, because I think that's fascinating, because I certainly feel like the age we're in now, it's very much around like almost like bite-sized snippets, just trying to get a few of those like real little nuggets that you can then sort of use, because we're kind of living busy hectic lives and things like that, and that's all we've got time for. I think for me and this journey, actually going, no, that isn't enough, and actually what I need to do is completely immerse myself into a whole new experience and test my mind and my body in new ways. That has been the thing for me that has enabled me to sort of like maybe break some patterns, and really sort of start to like form new ways of like tuning into myself. So,
and when would you say you kind of started doing that?
I would say that's literally while I've been here. And
whereas like I've been doing that for the last 6.5 years.
Yeah, totally.
So everybody's going to be in different. Yeah, but like your experiences before this might have been different from mine, so we all have like obviously things we need to move through and connect with, but it's really beautiful that like you've been able to recognize that.
Yeah, totally. And I think for me, the way it's kind of like shown up while I've been here is, I think from like more of a spiritual side of things, it's definitely been tapping into yoga. And I think I've always been the sort of person, I think from like a physical, sporty point of view, I've loved like doing sports. I always did sports at school and played football at university and all that sort of stuff, and go to the gym and bits and pieces like that. And so I'd be like, oh, give me the flow, like give me the vinyasa flow or whatever, and let me like get my sweat on and bang out, get it on. And I think that's absolutely got a place. It's definitely got a place. Like for me, actually, what really kind of like took me back and really sort of surprised me was then when I was tapping into practices like yin and restorative yoga, which really target your fascia and where you hold little like traumas and your emotions in your body. And I remember getting into some of these positions and being like, why are my hips so tight? Like I can't move in certain ways, my hamstrings and everything. I just feel like I'm like locked, you know. And like the teacher would be like, yeah, like that's years of, you know, just like experiences that you're holding there. So yeah, that was really like eye-opening for me actually. And then how I'd feel coming out of those sessions, you know, which would just be just incredible. It would just, you know, I'd feel like I would release so much in those sessions. So I think, yeah, going back to the kind of point I'm making, I think on the spiritual side of things, that's some of the bits that I've been doing to just try and like tap into that side. I've been doing stuff on the other physical end as well, and I guess this is all connected because that's body as well. But I think the other thing as well for me is that, well, I ruptured my Achilles about a year and a half ago. I think you know that. And
how did you rupture it?
It was so like, it almost feels like really, I wish there was an amazing story, you know? Like I was scaling a monument, or I was like climbing this incredible mountain, I just took her on a step. But I was just in the gym doing shuttle runs. It was really as like ridiculous, as silly as that. And yeah, I was just coming back down and like launching off, and it just went. And then I was like, bam, on the floor. Like, why am I here? How did this happen? And then obviously, then it all kind of went to the hospital, and obviously,
do you think your body had been telling you before that, like reflecting back? Like, do you think, because I don't know that, like, I know the things that when larger things happen to me, I've had many a sign before that I just didn't pay attention to.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's your experience. Like, were there other things in your body that like maybe could have been telling you that? No.
Yeah. No, I think it could have been. And you know, this was literally just after we'd come out of COVID as well. So we'd had basically 2 years of just like holding all of this, you know, trying to like do the things that we need to do and work and everything. Life was really intense and really like sort of, there was so much unknown about that period, wasn't there? And I think we've all kind of collectively held quite a lot through that period. So I think my body was probably holding an awful lot, plus obviously everything prior to that. And perhaps it was it was just one of those where it's like, you know, okay, break. And like, we need to like make space, I don't know, for something else. But so it took a while, and I'm still kind of recovering now. But I think while I've been here, I've been really conscious about pushing my body in different ways, and I've really got into walking and climbing and interacting with the incredible volcanoes and mountains on this land, in Bali and also Lombok as well, which has got Mount Machani, which is incredible, guys. So I really recommend that one. But it's been really amazing actually being able to do this and have these walks and treks and tune into how I feel, and just feel my way through that and push myself. And that's been a really amazing experience actually.
I think when we were like kind of thinking about this like exploration of love, and it was like, what is love? Like, there's like parental love and friendship love and romantic love and self-love, and then like this ultimate connection of love. And I think that for me, nature is embodied within that full connection, because we are the earth, and then, you know, like we are nature, and nature reflects us. And so like, can you expand a little bit on those feelings of like connecting to the land? Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, like, we're in a place which is totally magical and enchanting because you've got incredible lush forest. I mean, where we are now in Ubud, you know, we're looking out the window here. We've got like incredible greenery, like that we can just see. It's really lush, and those colours of green are so vivid. It's really quite remarkable, beautiful. And
you can take it a little bit for granted sometimes. Well, I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
anyway, because it's just like, oh, well, I got to get here and I need to do this. And I think like for me, just like driving around on my scooter with like all of the beautiful scenery and everything, sometimes it's just like, like, oh my God, I'm so grateful
yeah,
to be surrounded by this beauty.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is incredible. So that's where we are. That's where we are now, and we can see this, and we're sort of in that. You know, we're basically in the rainforest. But then, you know, we've got these amazing mountains and active volcanoes here on this land, which is a totally different terrain, and they have their own like feeling and spirit and energy, I would say.
And they're very sacred in like the Balinese culture as well.
Yeah, so sacred. And in fact, Agong is the highest mountain in Bali, and I've basically been flirting with Agong this whole trip. So I've been eyeing her up, basically.
You did climb her though.
I did,
yeah,
which was incredible and so special. But I built up to that, so I was kind of I would like see Agong on certain viewpoints and just be like, wow, this mountain is just something so special. And then I was like, I have to like interact more closely with the Gong, and I really want to like climb this mountain and feel that energy, basically. So I did, and that was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago when that happened. But on the spiritual side of things, going back as well, it took me a while actually to do that, because it was closed for a while because there were Hindi festivals that were happening, and you know, the mountains here are really respected. It's like there are certain points in the calendar that are really sacred, and it's one of the things that I love about this place is that, you know, that's really dedicated time that's for the people that are here, and actually you have to respect that. You know, you can't just do what you want when you want to do it. But when I finally managed to make that happen and to climb a Gum, it was very, very very special. And we chatted about this. It's not so much kind of like getting to the top of the summit, which is amazing, of course, but it's like watching the landscape change. You know, you start a little bit like Ubud in this like lush rainforest, and then you just witness the change to this kind of dry, rocky land. And then as you near the top, you know, you're basically interacting with a live crater, which has got its own thing kind of going on. And of course the weather that comes with it, and then being in the cloud and above the cloud, it's incredible. Yeah,
I have not personally climbed Agong, but I did climb Kilimanjaro in Tanzania.
Fair enough. And how was that? How were your experiences?
Oh, it was amazing, but like I don't think I've climbed a whole lot since. No, I have, but not like intentionally been climbing mountains. But I have a deep connection with the land in Tanzania, and I lived there for a while, and I think it was like one of the first trips I saw it. I didn't go being like, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro, but there was something so kind of how you said you were like flirting with a Gong. It was like, I was just like being drawn to Kilimanjaro. I just was like, I've got to do this. So I like went home. It was like a year later, and I had trained. It's like a 7-day climb, 6-7 day climb. I think it's like 5 or 6 up and like 1.5 down. Yeah, you basically just like I ran off the mountain. But yeah, nature to me has been a newer connection. I feel over this like past 6 years. I have worked with plant medicines and worked with nature in that way. And the climb for Kilimanjaro, so this was actually before the brain injury. And I was already like getting those connections, right? But I just didn't really know. I was more like seeking adventure. I wasn't seeking connection at that point. And that climb, the terrain changes. I wasn't like super appreciative of that in that moment, because I was like, oh my God, we're walking forever. Forever. Because it's not like Kilimanjaro is not a tough climb until you get to like the summit night. It's more about the altitude, because you really start out at like kind of ground zero and work all the way up to the top. and it's the highest freestanding mountain in Africa. And so as I was climbing, really what started getting me was the clouds. So I have a very deep connection to the sky, to the sun, to the moon, to the stars. Like that is like where I feel my divine connection is. And the ocean. Water is like big for me.
Yeah.
And there's something about like as you're climbing through, I had a little bit of an argument with my guide because I was like, so we're like climbing through the clouds right now, right? And he's like, no, it's just mist. And I'm like, okay, but when we're done with the mist, we'll be above the clouds. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, so we're climbing through the clouds? No, it's mist.
Where does the mist start on the cloud? Yeah.
I mean, you know, we could get into a whole technical conversation about what clouds are, I guess. But I think just those moments of getting above the clouds, I was just like, it's a whole different world up here.
Totally.
And that's been a really like that climb to the summit was so hard on my body, but I was determined to get to the top. And I think it was like a full moon and the stars were out, and I just like I was hallucinating. I like connected to my guardian angel. Like there was just so much happening within that I was like, it was an incredibly spiritual experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. Like there are these signs and indicators on the way. I think getting above the clouds is really incredible because actually, like when I reflect on that sort of in the moment, I'm like, well, when have I been above the clouds? And it's like often it's when you're in the air, you're on the plane and you see them and you're like, wow, that's beautiful. You might see a sunset from the plane window, which is incredible. But actually you moving your body up and through is quite a different experience, isn't it? So I think that's one of the things that they provide because they're so high is that you can have all of these different experiences really within like one moment, if you like, which is the climb. So yeah, really like truly special.
And when you get to the top, it's like, I don't know that it's like an ecstatic, well, for me, it was like just this ecstatic, like joy. And I guess reflecting back on it would be like this love of like, and gratitude of all the beauty around me and all the beauty that I could see. And yeah, just like being above everything.
Yeah. And I think as well, like that, and I guess the addition for me was like and gratitude to your body to be like, you brought like, me wow here. Thank you, you're amazing.
So at that point I wasn't connected to my body really. I'd had my lap band in like 2006. 2016 is when I climbed Kilimanjaro, and that year I had like I don't know, I had to go to the hospital. I ended up getting the lap band out, and then like maybe a month later, 6 weeks later, I started training for Kilimanjaro. So I don't know that I would have suggested that for anyone else if they had actually like tuned into their body, because I actually also got a fractured heel and climbed Kilimanjaro with a fractured heel.
Did you know?
So I did. And I was like, I'm not dealing with this. Like, I'll figure it out when I get back.
Wow. What was behind that, do you think? That almost like, because it's almost like quite a narrow-minded, steely determination to be like, I'm just doing this. But like, what was behind those feelings for you?
Well, I didn't have feelings. There weren't feelings. I mean, there were plenty of feelings that I wasn't feeling. But I think that's just how I was navigating through life for a very, like, in New York, and like, I can't like pinpoint exactly like when that kind of started. I've always been very determined, and like very resilient, but this was more of a shutdown, you know, it's just like kind of like a robotic way of like living. And then it was I attribute it to like my sensory kind of sensitivity and like the sense of overwhelm that I experience. And I do believe that like, over time, I just started numbing more and more and more, because it was like, I mean, if I look at like how sensitive I am now and like understand like the small things that like affect just my interaction throughout the day, and then I think about the way I was living my life, like of course I couldn't feel anything. But that's also why this whole like experience of feeling love was so drastic that first time. because I hadn't felt anything that had come really within inside of me, unless it was like climbing Kilimanjaro or trekking with gorillas in Uganda or jumping out of a helicopter in Switzerland, or, you know, it was like, it had to be like full on to feel anything.
Yeah. I think that's so fascinating. It's interesting actually when you have these moments, whether they're like big or small, and obviously in the example that you shared, these had to be like big things that you were doing for you to have that like moment. But I think it's interesting because I guess it connects back with ways of love, which is what we're kind of like talking about, isn't it? And when you have those moments, and it can be quite it can be very like impactful. And I think the mountains, absolutely, like they give you that opportunity because you have like such like wow moments when you're, say, standing at the top and you're looking out, and you know you've got these incredible views and things like that. But I remember actually, and I know you've had her on, you had Tina on, didn't you, a few episodes ago, and I remember actually here just attending her class at the yoga barn, and it was the first class of hers that I'd kind of gone to, and I had one of those moments, and it really like took me by surprise, and it was like pure euphoria. I remember feeling, I was like, wow, like you can actually just be sitting on a mat, really just doing some very subtle movements. I think if anyone was to attend, you know, or was looking in on the class, you'd be like, but you're like barely doing anything, you know, but you're actually tuning in to your nervous system, and things are moving within your body through just very subtle kind of movements. And I remember at the end of that class, just being like, I just felt like this fluffy cloud. I was like, how is this possible to have this kind of like these feelings that I've got at the moment? And I just felt like high in just such an incredible like natural way. So I guess that's like an example of a wave of love that's kind of like hit me.
Yeah, which is like, it's so incredible that you were able to experience that within that class, and that's really been this journey for me. It's just taken me a lot longer to get there, you know, which is fine, because that's just what my experience is. And but like looking back and like knowing that, I guess it's just that it's accessible to everyone, right? That feeling within you is yours, and it is accessible to you at any time. But for me, it was learning what that felt like in order for it to be accessible. And then where I found myself is like, then I was seeking more. So I would say like probably those euphoric feelings of like skydiving and stuff like that is like, how can I get more of this? So I would find more adventurous things to do. Whereas now it's like, it is embodied within me. It is like in my experience. I feel it in my body, and I can tap into it at any time.
Yeah.
Because it's mine.
Do you feel like you had to have these experiences? So like the big adventures that you did, those kind of like thrill-seeking activities, like would you say that's very much been part of your process to kind of identify, oh, that's what that feeling is, so that now you're more readily able to actually identify that in just more like everyday activities?
I don't know if I think that was kind of like pre-injury. So yes, like that was the way that I was going in that part of my life. But that's how I sustained a brain injury, as I was sledding down Korketrekken in Norway, and I sledded into a wall. And so obviously that wasn't my way to love.
No. Well,
it was just through, like, it was kind of like I was on this trajectory of like, go, 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 numbing out. I was so determined that really what had to be taken away was my mind. And so when the brain is injured, it's not fully working at capacity. And so that's how I was then able to begin tapping into the body.
Yeah. So your piece was all about has been about tapping into the body. That's like the big expression of like self-love that you've been kind of exploring over the last sort of 5+ years.
Yeah. Well, self-love and then what love looks like in other aspects.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that you can, well, this is just my opinion, right? But I don't know that I could have loved another person if I didn't know what love was, if I didn't know how it felt. And that's in any regards. That's friendships, parents, like siblings, romance, like all of it. Like, I definitely have amazing people in my life who love me dearly. And I was having this conversation with our friend the other day of like, but do people know what love feels like? Like when you're like with friends or partners or like whatever, like, can you feel that love? For me, the answer was no for a really long time.
Yeah.
I knew they loved me, but it was more of like an analytical knowing than it was a feeling.
What does it feel like to be loved?
So that's a question that like I'm still like learning to understand, because I do think it obviously comes in so many different ways depending on the person and who you're with, and I think one of the interesting things, and it's like I finally felt love within myself, and then I loved someone else for the first time. And it was really beautiful because it was the moment that it was the first moment that I had felt the love that I could give. And I also felt the love from someone else. And obviously there was like a lot within that for like me working up to that moment. And it had to do with me learning what love was like within me first.
Yeah.
But like when I think about it now of like, what does love feel like? It can feel like just sitting with someone, like being with them. I actually had a good cry this morning because I was like, I think things just finally kind of clicked for me after this conversation the other day, and then the conversations we've been having. And then I was like, I had that conversation with the guy at dinner last night where I was telling him like, it's about the antenna, it's about solidifying those feelings within your body. And for me, it's been a very external seeking of love from friends, from partners, and just like being loved feels great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When you allow yourself.
To be loved. But this morning I was like, oh, but it is anchored in my body. I can tap into, like, if I think of those people and like how it felt, I can bring those feelings forth that don't have to do with someone else. They're just the feelings within me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what does that feel like? It can feel like safety. It can feel like security. It can feel like being held. It can feel passionate. It can feel, just like this like calm wave within your body.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more, but that's kind of what I discovered this morning.
Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah, there's a full spectrum of feelings, aren't there, like associated with love. And that's what's so special about it. And that connection with self, as we all know, is where it all starts, isn't it? And I think that's a really incredible thing.
Well, yes, it starts with the self, but also I do believe that like everybody kind of has a different entry point. So that's kind of something I've talked about a lot within this podcast, is like there are different ways that people experience the same thing. So like for me, I had to anchor into myself and to my body and into the sensation and feeling of love in order to open myself up to even think about receiving it. Other people I know like have had relationships, like many relationships in their lives, and that's where they learned about love. But that wasn't my personal experience, because mine was more a journey with like learning my body.
Yeah, totally. And then for others, they've learned it through like their parents, for example, which have kind of like shown them a way to be loved and, and to love back. So yeah, there's so many different ways in which we kind of learn it, aren't there?
But then it kind of comes down to, but what is it actually for you? Like I learned, Yeah, like there was the parental, well, like you said earlier, it's like we go through this, like, if you look at it in astrology, I'm not like, I don't know a ton about astrology, but people talk about your Saturn return. And your Saturn return is like 28 to 30. And then when you look at it in your brain aspect, it's like the brain doesn't finish developing, which means the nervous system doesn't finish developing, which means we're not fully formed until like, I think it's around 26. And so all of that working up to those moments are like you learning through other people, through experiences.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of, you get to this point where it's like, well, what does it mean to me? And is that true for me? And are all of those things conducive to my way of being and my like true self?
Yeah, and I guess like sort of going back to your moment, because you'd been investing in yourself so much, hadn't you, with the 200 hours of yoga training and loads of bits and pieces, and then obviously you had this moment of like, yeah, I am totally worthy of it, and I've got so much love to give, and then it showed up for you. Like how did that feel? Like, can you describe that experience if you're comfortable to describe it?
Yeah, I was actually doing one of Tina's yin classes, and she was teaching in the 200 hour, and I had also been doing a lot of IFS with my therapist, and it was almost like this combination of like all the work that I had done around like inner child and like the parts of me that needed to be seen and held and loved. And then I'm in these like yin poses, and all of a sudden it just like rushes and connects in my body. And then it was just this like euphoric feeling. I even have a photo of the day that it happened, because I went back to my villa and I got into the pool and I was just like spinning, because water is everything to me. And I got in the pool and I was just like spinning around, and I just like have this like it was just this like joy and love, and the feeling was like just this rush. But the thing is like, okay, great, that happened. I didn't know how to anchor into that. So then I've spent the last like however long seeking it again.
Yeah.
It's like we keep
that feeling
of like this euphoric love that I have experienced also in like romantic relationships. And but that was coming from an external source.
Yeah.
I thought it was anyway, but it wasn't, because it was that was the love within me,
Yeah. It feels like, I mean, and I think we've all, like, you've had some of these moments, and I've certainly had a few of these moments which are incredibly euphoric and like surprising and kind of take your breath away a little bit when they're happening. But it's also like those intense feelings are not
every day.
They're not every day. No. They're really quite occasional. It's quite like it doesn't happen very often, does it? Which is probably why when it does, you're like, wow, it's so incredible.
But I think it's kind of on point with like what we're talking about my kind of progression of like, it needs to be like, hello,
big.
Yeah, for me to like hear it. And so it's really about tapping into it. And I think that's why I had a good cry this morning, because I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. No.
It doesn't actually, does it? Have you got, because I totally agree, it doesn't have to be. And that's something that I've kind of...
what's your experience with that?
Well, like, certainly, like, so while I've been here, there's been one or two moments I've been like, wow, like, that's such an amazing, intense feeling. But actually, when I think about it, and I think about the ways of love, which we're kind of tapping into, it's been a very, like, subtle... The emotions have been very sort of subtle around it, and it's just like unfolded in a really, almost like a very like calm and peaceful way, like while I've been on the journey here. And actually, it's just been, the feelings are just more like, they're just really like solid and secure feelings like within myself that have happened through, I guess, almost like this investment that I'm putting in through eating well. I mean, we're so lucky to be in Bali because
Food is so
how
good.
incredible. I mean, the tropical fruit is insane, isn't it? Dragon fruit, papaya, coconuts coming out of your ears. It's just like, it is unbelievable. So we are nourished, and I think food is really important, because I think, you know, we're putting that in. That's what's giving us our like energy, vitality, and health, and all of that. So, like, that's one of the base level things, which is just like abundant here, which is incredible. So I think that's been something I've been really conscious of, and I realised actually while I've been here and eating this delicious food and nourishing myself in that way, how out of touch I was back home. You know, and you just grab stuff because it's quick.
Oh, and you just like eat,
and then I'm not even thinking about
like,
it.
Am I hungry?
Don't know. Am I full? Don't know.
Yeah.
So that has been, honestly, a real exploration in itself, and now I feel like it's something that I do much more consciously. And what else? And like, obviously, we've talked about like the physical side, these small like challenges that I've been giving myself. But then just sort of having some daily practices as well, whether that's yoga classes, whether that's doing a bit of gym when I want to, like, I don't know, have a bit more kind of like, you know, get my sweat on and just feel like I'm, you know, doing something like a bit more rigorous. But I've had these kind of I've just put in place, I think, a few structures while I've been here, which has really helped me to tap into that like self-nourishment that we're talking about. And then that love has felt very solid. It's felt like basically I've managed to reroute myself, and I realised that I was just like in an orbit somewhere, you know, beforehand. So yeah, I feel very rooted now.
What would you think is because I've sort of explored this a little bit with myself of like, I think we were even talking about it earlier, but it's like, okay, so we're like, have so many things to do every day, right? Well, so now it's like, oh my God, I need to journal. I need to take my probiotics. I need to do my yoga. I need to do my meditation. I need to move my body. And then it becomes a full-time job as well. So like, what is the line between like self-care and self-love?
Ooh, that's such a challenging question, because I think as well, it's almost like, you know, you could argue that I'm almost in a little bit of a bubble at the moment, because, you know, I'm not working, you know, which is really nice. I've taken a career break so that I can do this and go through this kind of process. And actually something that I've been reflecting on as I'm coming to the end of this journey is, well, actually, what are the pieces that I'm going to hold on to when I go back into life, you know, in the UK, in London, and at some point I am going to need to work again, and all of that kind of stuff. I think for me, it's getting really clear around kind of what your boundaries are. So actually, what are the things that you're prepared to flex, and what are the things where you're actually like, no, this is something that is really, really important for me. So for some people, that might be, actually, when it comes back to work and working, I have to finish at 5 every day, because that enables me to make sure that I'm cooking a really delicious meal and I'm not eating really late, or that I'm going to get to that class that I said I was going to go to. And so one of my boundaries is I'm going to be really tight around my time so that I can do that, and that will make me feel good. And for others, it might be like, I'm going to get up really early every day because I want to watch the sunrise, and that's really nourishing, or whatever. So I think and I haven't answered these questions yet, by the way, Britt, but I'm just starting to reflect on now, okay, well, what are my boundaries going to be?
Because how many days do you have left here?
3. So I've not got long to sort this out.
You got a long plane ride
I've got a long plane ride. I've got a good 18 hours. So that'll sort me. But I think even having that little insight around, okay, I need to be, you know, I need to like respect myself, love myself, you know, and really start to think about what are those things that I might be okay with tweaking, and what are things that aren't, so that I can protect, you know, what I know is going to nourish me.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, the self-care is the way to self-love, as long as the self-care doesn't become a checklist. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where like things have, I can get into like a routine, which a routine does help me. But as long as the routine has intention, And the intention is to connect to me and what I need.
Yeah. And what would you say are kind of those important intentions for you? That, because in a way you're coming towards the end of a journey as well, aren't you? We both are actually around a similar time. What are those kind of intentions that you learned about yourself and you want to take with you in your new chapter?
Well, intentions wise, I'll come to it, but I think one of the big revelations I had the other day was that I've been in Bali now for 9.5-ish months. I took a little stint. I was in Thailand for like a month and a half, but I have felt so held and nourished and loved and supported and happy and like all this like love for life and gratitude, and I haven't felt that ever. Like I have in spurts, but like it just really shows how far I've come on this journey for myself, and that like I'd hate the word content because but like I am content in who I am. I'm proud of who I am. I love who I am in this moment. And it feels, I'm leaving Bali in 2 weeks, and it feels really scary because I feel like I've been searching for this my whole life. And I'm like, will I be able to hold it somewhere else? Will it be the same? Obviously, it's not going to be the same because this is, and so really the revelation that I have was that I have been in a womb. I've been in the womb of Bali for the last, let's say, 8-ish months. And it's time to be reborn out into the world. And it's time for me to start focusing on my work and like what I'm going to put out into the world and who I am in that respect. And so when we think about intentions, it's like I'm being like held and supported and loved in this beautiful bubble, this womb that like I really have been seeking my whole life, right? And then all of a sudden I'm like getting spit back out into the world, and it's like, oh shit. Like that's literally like, you know. And so like intention wise is like just always connecting to me first. And through the body I've been able to do that in like ways that like I know we've kind of talked about human design a little bit, which I'm not going to go to in this episode, but it is a tool of self-inquiry and self-awareness. And for me, one of the most important things is like, as a generator, I need yes and no questions in order to tune into the fastest and easiest way of knowing what's right for me. And like, I'm getting really good at feeling that contraction as a no and the expansion as a yes. And what's tricky is when you know what's right for you and it doesn't align with the world around you. And so I think that's the thing that I'm going to be focusing on most, is that I'm always listening to the alignment and the love within me, which will therefore allow the love between me and the world, me and others, because I am in alignment with myself.
Yeah, totally. I think that point around alignment is really interesting and sort of fascinating, because I think, I mean, when I sort of reflect, there's certain points where I'm like, oh, wow, that perhaps really wasn't in alignment, and that's why there's been that kind of friction. But I think sometimes as sort of human beings, we have a tendency to maybe like hold on to something, even if you know it's not completely right for you, because I don't know, like there's priorities in life that we need to, there's things that we need to, or we feel like we have to do. We've got to pay our bills, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. So, but actually going back and thinking, well, no, but perhaps that isn't in alignment with me. It can be such an incredibly like releasing thing, and kind of actively going, well, actually, I'm not going to pursue that anymore, or I'm going to do something different. How does that feel to you when you say no to something that isn't in alignment?
Well, it's like kind of, there's a lot of aspects, right? Yeah. Because when I say something like, no, it's not in alignment, it feels amazing because I'm learning to trust myself again. I'm learning to, my body's learning to trust me. My being is learning to trust that I will do what is best for us, this experience, right? And but in our society, that's not necessarily always okay.
Yeah.
Or okay, right? It's like we have been kind of taught to put others in front of us at points. And so sometimes it doesn't feel great because you might be letting other people down, right? But also we're not in charge of other people's emotions.
Yeah.
Like we just have to trust that like what's in alignment for me is in alignment for them because we have agreed upon this situation, you know, maybe not in human form, but in soul form.
Yeah, totally.
But like last night, so I was going to a yoga class and I got there and my body was like, nope. And, you know, and then like, so my kind of MO is like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure, buddy?
Come on.
Yeah, come on. Are you sure you don't want to just go? Are you sure about it? And it's like, that's teaching us to question our innate knowing.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like, our knowing is our soul, right? It is for our highest good, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so it's just trusting that whether like somebody's going to have an emotional reaction about something, or you're disappointing somebody or whatever that is, that you just have to trust that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And undoubtedly, like in these points where you're making a decision, it's not always going to serve every person, and that's impossible to do anyway, isn't it? So I think selecting what feels right for you, that's where we have to start, isn't it?
And it's not a selfish, it's not like in a selfish way. And I think that's part of what our society like really imposes upon us is like, if you're choosing you're being selfish. And it's like, well, no, I'm choosing to love and appreciate and know myself, the self, not in a selfish way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And then as a result of that, of the decisions that you make, actually then you're kind of throwing out the best version of yourself because what you've decided is an alignment. So it feels good. You're able to give all of yourself in whatever that experience is. So actually it kind of ends up serving it. It does end up serving other people, doesn't it? Yeah.
What's your intention kind of going back?
What's my intention? I think for me, it's going to be really around some of these things that I've kind of learned, and you just talked about it actually, which was around like trusting yourself. That has been something that's been huge, and that's kind of like that's really that's been something that I think I've kind of not battled with, but it's been like a theme for me for quite a period of time around. I don't know. I feel like I've got a really strong connection to my sort of intuition, but then actually trusting yourself and like backing the decisions that you make is something else entirely, isn't it? And I think while I've been here, I've been able to tune in, listen to what myself, my soul, my body is asking of me, and respond to that. And I think that is the bit that I really want to make sure that I'm going to make sure I do when I go home, which is to listen to that, to serve it, and to trust what my body's telling me is the right thing to do, you know, my intuition, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
That kind of almost like a voice, isn't it? Is to listen to that. Because I do think it's like you say, when you've got these things going on, or maybe you've been in like relationships and you're kind of, course, in a relationship you have to compromise, like otherwise it's not going to work. But I think it's thinking about, okay, yeah, but then at what point do you, because you can end up going so far down that track of compromise that you end up like sacrificing yourself or losing pieces of yourself, or then being really unsure about, okay, what am I feeling, and like all of that. So I think it's being really aware and making these conscious decisions that serve you, and then ultimately people that love you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The compromise thing is really interesting because it's like, do we though? Do we
have to compromise?
Because it's like, okay, so if I am fully experiencing love within my expression because I'm so aligned with what I'm doing, and like, let's say, a partner's like, well, let's do this, right? And everything in me is like, ugh. Is it okay to override yourself?
I mean, it's okay.
Because that is kind of giving a piece of yourself away.
Yeah, it is.
And I've worked so hard to like put these pieces together.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like ultimately, you could say, well, actually, if somebody or my partner, or whoever it is, really loves me, then they will kind of respect those decisions that I make. If it doesn't feel right, if it's not in alignment, so I say no, whilst that might be hard, that ultimately they will kind of accept that and respect that. But I think I think it's hard to say no sometimes.
Yeah. Right. I think so. I did have Kat, who is also going to be on the podcast. She told me at one point that if it is a no, it can be like you need to state your boundary around it. So like, let's say you wanted to go to dinner somewhere and I wanted to go to dinner somewhere, and both of us were like, but like I've picked all the restaurants for the last times we've met,
which is true.
Well, I mean, but you go along with it. I hope you're not inside like going, ooh.
No, that bit isn't true. I'm like,
but like,
it's got great taste in food.
The food here is incredible.
Yeah.
But like, because I had picked all the other ones and you really wanted to go to this place, if she was just saying, if I said something like, that's really not my first pick, but like, since I've picked all the other ones, let's do it. And like, that for me is a way to sort of compromise and stay in integrity with yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're stating what your experience is, but like still kind of allowing the flow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that's.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example, and obviously we're picking like a really soft topic like food.
I know there's going to be like larger.
Yeah, there's going to be like bigger things that are more complex, I guess. That we kind of like have to navigate. But I think you talked about intention, and I've sort of said the word like boundaries as well. That's kind of come up. I think they're kind of similar in a way. It's kind of being really clear around what you want to get out of a situation or what you're prepared to basically sort of say no to. And I think if you can go into something being clear about your intention and being really clear about what your boundaries are, then I think it's going to be a good experience, isn't it? Yeah. For the best experience that it could be.
Because I mean, really, like, whether you're with friends, partners, whatever, like, well, for me, it's like I want to love them in the best way to love them while still loving me in the best way to love me.
Totally.
And coexisting within that love together. Yeah.
And that might mean saying no then because it doesn't fit, doesn't suit. And that's okay, isn't it? It's okay to say no.
It's okay to say no. Yeah. It's hard sometimes though.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And as you say, like especially when you've been conditioned not to hurt anyone's feelings and to put other people first, which is a really beautiful thing to do, but just not at the expense of yourself. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is there anything? What have we not touched on?
No, I don't know. I feel like it's been a good basis. It was just the only other piece that I was thinking, because we talked about it a lot, was just around some of like your journey around your kind of like love journey. I don't know if you wanted to like tap into some of the experiences that.
I mean, I can speak to that. Yeah, sure. I think like what I had said earlier in the sense of like in the way to like knowing the love within myself and experiencing that allowed me to then open up to like love another person. I think was just like, it was a really like profound turn point for me because like I said, I hadn't understood what love felt like. And so that's really had me like recently, because then I've like, you know, had an incredible relationship with another partner, and like it's like discovering all these different facets of what love looks like.
Yeah.
And then knowing like what it feels like for me, but like what's important to me in that. And I kind of expressed it in the sense of like, what is love? And love is, for me, it's like, it's that feeling of feeling safe within myself with another person.
Yeah.
And like feeling calm and like just like connected, and being able to just sort of, you use the word like orbit, but like orbit together and apart, you know.
Yes.
And like really be able to stand within my own truth, and also, I guess sometimes I'm not sure about the compromise.
No, that's good. Like you can throw that one
I'm
out.
still kind of out for debate on that, in the sense of like, I don't know, I've just like come to know myself so deeply in this point that like, I hope that anyone, friends, family, can just respect that like, I'm doing what's best for me so that I can be the best version of myself for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something that is so powerful about that, actually. And I think when I hear that, like in conversation, you know, I mean, we've kind of suggested things, just really like casual things, like, oh, do you want to do this? Do you want to go for dinner here? Do you want to go to this yoga session? Do you want to go and do this like static dance or whatever it is? And I think like when you hear back, oh, actually, no, that isn't going to be right for me, or I'm going to be tired because I've got this or that, or whatever, you then learn something about that person. And I really love that, because it's like, okay, I know that isn't going to be right for you, because I don't know, maybe you'll have burnt a load of energy doing something else, and then like my respect
and also not being upset about it, you know.
It's like quite the opposite.
It's like, cool, okay, I'm still gonna go do this though, you know.
I'm still gonna do it because that's what's right for me. But there's something that I think draws me when I feel like somebody else is grounded. And I think being able to say, no, that doesn't work for me for like these reasons, or that isn't in alignment with me for whatever reason, I find that actually incredibly grounding to hear and receive that. It's like, hey, I really respect that, you know, and that's really, really important for me. And I think in turn, it's a reminder to me that that's okay too as well. And to remind myself actually what's right for you, what's serving you.
And that's really, I mean, it's been a journey for me. I'm not sure how it feels for you, but like, I definitely was a people pleaser.
Oh yeah.
And like, still on the cusp. But when I do feel comfortable like with a person, and like know that like they're okay with me stating my boundaries, then it feels okay. It's more like when I know like, is it gonna,
how's it gonna land?
It's like, I'm sure, right? But it's like, but I still know within me what's right. And so, and like through romantic relationships, through friendships, like all of that, it's just like, it's really solidifying, I think, for me, the way that love is what you just said. It's like respecting the person to like fully embrace themselves. You know, and like allowing them to just live their fullest expression. And like not be upset about shit. You know, of course our feelings, like, we're gonna have feelings, but it's like, it doesn't need to disrupt everything.
It doesn't. And I think a part of this whole journey is also about interrogating your feelings. So like, okay, this is what this is thrown up for me. You don't need to go and have like an immediate conversation with someone. I think it starts with you first, like, oh, I felt this way, why? And interrogate that feeling, you know, and understand that, you know, about yourself.
I know, because sometimes it's like, it's not even rational. Most of the time, it's
moon.
not rational. Oh my gosh, this last full moon, I don't know when this podcast episode is going to come out, but this last full moon, I think it was in Sagittarius, and like, I just sobbed for days. And then I saw Phoebe, and she was like,
what's been going on? You were like, it was a full moon, and I was like, that's...
like, just all the tears. But, just kind of like learning what that looks like. Yeah, one of the things I did want to kind of talk about, was, so we were talking about like the mountains and like standing on the mountains and this journey of love and all this stuff. And I think like one of the pieces I wanted to speak to was sometimes it's not our shit. Sometimes it's like our ancestors as well. And sometimes it's like the things that have been passed down to us. And luckily or not, like maybe we're the ones that are chosen to move through that for our family, for the people that have come before us. And so this journey of love for me, like not only has it taken me through self-love and loving other people, but like I went on this whole journey. So I started in England last June, and I like went to the solstice at Stonehenge and like had these incredible experiences. And I was sort of following some of the energy lines of the earth. And I went to Glastonbury, which is the heart chakra and currently the third eye chakra of the world. And, like stood on top of the Tor and just all these, so it's, all of like the ancestors knew the sacredness to these, like just like the Balinese culture like honors the volcanoes and the mountains. It's like all of the sacred sites in like England and Scotland and Ireland, which are my roots, which you could probably speak a little bit more to because you're actually English in this life and I'm not. But
you've
like
explored it.
But like I think they all would like the sacred sites were the hills. They were the highest points, not only for like strategic stuff so that they could see everything that was around them, but also just because it's closer to the divine. It's closer to, and so the Tor is one of them, and it was just so potent. And so I kind of followed that, and like I went up to Edinburgh and did Arthur's Seat, and like that I had a huge like kind of full circle moment because the first time I climbed Arthur's Seat was 2 months after my brain injury.
Okay.
So, and I was like having a really hard time and I didn't really know how out of it I was at that point. And like, so I'm like getting ready to reclimb this beautiful like mountain and I just had so much gratitude for all that had happened so far and like for the journey that I had been on. And I was so grateful to like for the land for holding me in that way. And so then this is like a long story to get to the ancestor part, but I'll get there. So then I like go through Scotland and I take the ferry across to Belfast and I'm in Northern Ireland and I felt so held by the land there. And I was also getting ready to embark on this like ancestral piece that it had revealed itself to me over this journey. But the idea is that like love in my paternal side had stopped 8 generations before. And it was very apparent in the way that like my dad didn't really know how to love. My grandmother didn't really know. They did in the best way they knew how, but the feelings weren't there.
Yeah.
It just was not connected to actually feeling love, right? It was more like an embodiment of like, or like showing it, I guess. And I'm sure they did feel love in their own way, but it was just a very kind of disconnected in a sense. And so I knew I was going to that. So like, I'm in Belfast and I'm like experiencing this like it's joy. It was like full on joy is what I was experiencing. And I was working with this woman doing a lot of energy work at the time to help clear stuff along the way. And I was working with her one time and she was like, this land, you've been on this land before and you were really good to it. And so in this moment, it's giving back to you. And so it was filling my cup up so much so that I could go on to this next piece of the journey. And there was some other stuff that was going on in Belfast where I was just like experiencing like kind of some endings of things that like it was beautiful and sad and joyful. And like I was just experiencing like holding all of these emotions at once. That then I like got in my car, which I've never driven on the other side of the road. Well, now I have in Bali, but in a car on the Irish roads is like a little bit more drastic where you're like, I hope I don't die. I get in the car at like the Belfast airport and the guy's like, so, you know, you like have to like push this button when you park. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't know that.
The handbrake.
Yeah. Well, so we don't have to use that in America. Our automatic cars just park.
There's no handbrake.
There is a handbrake, but like, what do you use it for? I'm not like, unless you're like on a hill like this, like I've never used it in my life. And so you have to put the handbrake on in order for the car not to roll back even when it's in park. So I'm really glad. I'm really thankful that you told me that because I would have been in the ditch like 5 minutes later. But, so I get in my car and I'm driving and I get to, so like Northern Ireland, like kind of ends and then it goes straight into Donegal County.
Yeah.
So Donegal County is where this guy in my family, in my ancestry had stopped loving. I don't know the story behind where, I don't know why, like, I don't know any of that information. And it was interesting because as I was like tracking all the ancestry, I could only find back to him. So there was nothing after him. So it was like this is it. This is it. Like, this is the point I need to kind of address. And so I literally cross into Donegal County and I'm just like, it's just horrible feelings inside. I feel so upset. I feel so sad. I just feel miserable. And I'm like, okay, I know why we're here and we're just going to spend some time on the land. I'm working with Heidi, who's kind of helping me work through all of these like emotions and process them. And she had also was like, really fill your cup with the joy from the land in Belfast and Northern Ireland, like really feel that so that when you move into this next piece, you can
you're
like,
equipped.
Yeah, you're ready. And so I was climbing everything in Ireland. I was just like climbing to the top of it and it was bringing me so much joy and connection. While I'm like feeling this like horrible like heaviness. And so I can't really remember the timeline, but basically I was climbing I'd been there for a few days. I climbed a bunch of stuff and I was trying to find all the like sacred sites and I'm on the Sleevely Cliffs. Okay. I think that's how you say it. And I'm like, first of all, I didn't do any research. So everything I was climbing, I was really only researching how to get there. And then literally every time I got there, it was like, it's a 30-minute climb to get to where you, and I was like, are you kidding me? And you think I would have like caught on throughout my trip, but I never really caught on. Every time I'd be like, oh, I have to walk.
So put out
I can't just look. But then I'd get there and I'd like frolic around and sing and make up songs and enjoy, being on the land. But so it was another time, these cliffs, like it was like a pretty intense, like it was a long walk and I didn't really know where it ended and like where I needed to climb, but I knew I needed to be at my appointment. No, like afterwards I was having a call with Heidi.
Right.
And, so I like get there and I'm like, oh my God, like this is endless. Like I could walk forever. Like people were walking all the way like around everything. And I was like, okay, I got to get back. I'll have the call in the car. It'll be fine. And so I get to the car and there's no service. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay, what do we do? And so I drive down and there's like a welcome center and I go into the welcome center. I'm like, do you have Wi-Fi? And they're like, yes. I was like, do you have a quiet room? I have a doctor's appointment that I need to do. And they were like, you can go in the storage room.
Coats, bags.
Oh, no.
Dusty.
It was like Cokes and Sprites and snacks. And it was like all their like like food and snacks and
Yeah.
stuff. And so like I'm sitting on the floor surrounded like by all this stuff. I call Heidi and she's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "Oh, funny story. I'm in a storage closet." And but that was the moment. That was it. Like we had this session and I just literally, I got on the phone with her and I was just sobbing and I was like, "I feel so horrible here. Like I feel so heavy, like whatever it is needs to go." And so that connection to love was rekindled by releasing that ancestral piece.
Wow.
And so in the storage room of the Welcome Center of the Slaveley Cliffs in Donegal County, I cleared the trauma of the love not being allowed like to pass through and to be felt on the family line.
Yeah.
And so then she was like, "You kind of need to stay on the land for the next couple days." And I was like, "Oh,
I've just done it. I've done the job."
So I did. I like kind of went around and like I went down to, I don't really know where I was, but I went to the little city and stayed for a couple days. And then it was literally like the minute I was allowed to leave, it was just like this expansion. I drove out of the county and I had the most incredible time, like exploring the rest of Ireland and like the sacred sites that I saw. And I just kept climbing. Like I went to Uisneach, I went to, what's the other really, the Hill of Tara. And I went to like all the different like Neolithic monuments.
Incredible.
And
you've done the work. That's the thing, you've done the work by that point as well. So I imagine those feelings then when you're exploring these beautiful parts of the land and monuments and all that was just like,
it was just rushes, all the waves of love, all the waves of love. The Rock of Cashel was also another really like, because it's so interesting, the dynamic of like obviously all of the Catholicism and St. Patrick that was like placed upon all the ancient Celtic and like all the sacred sites and this like duality of like, it's like you can really feel the different time periods when you're in it. And it's like, I'm here and I'm living within these two other realms that have like kind of come on top of each other. I don't know. It was wild and like so incredible. So then I just kind of like did all of that and circled back up to Belfast and like I was not planning on
topped your cup up.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on going back there, but I needed that like feeling of being held again.
Yeah.
And so I stayed for like another week or so in Belfast just to like feel the joy. Yeah, feel the joy. And then I had thought I was gonna like go live in Switzerland, and I got to Switzerland and it just didn't resonate with my being. I was there for like 3 or 4 weeks though, really like testing it out. I was in Geneva, and it was funny because it's always like this, a little thing that I experience is like when things, until you figure out what you're supposed to do, you have to, I feel a little bit miserable.
Yeah, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And it takes so much work. And I think, there's also like some dead ends as well. There's bits that you have to go back and actually like when you're in it, there's some bits that are really uncomfortable as well, which obviously you experienced.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, when I was in Geneva, until I booked my flight to Bali, everything was not good. And then the moment I booked my flight to Bali, I could go explore and like I went to all these other beautiful parts and like had such a beautiful, joyous time. It was just like, you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to be in Bali.
Yeah.
And so those are like those things that we were talking about earlier about like just really tapping into your own body and tapping into your intuition. And,
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, finding places as well that really get you where you really feel like aligned. I think it's also quite unusual. Now I know obviously you know a little bit, like we talked about human design and there's certain principles and other bits and pieces and lines of the earth, and there's exercises that you can do to, you know, to sort of build up your knowledge around what might feel good. But also so much is about what you're experiencing now, what you might need, what you can give. There's so many parts to it, isn't there? But I think when you find something that feels really right, and obviously I think something that we both have in common is that being here in this incredible place has felt so right for both of us. It really is. It's really special, isn't it?
And then you kind of want to hold on to it.
You do.
And that's not the point.
No, it isn't.
And that's what's upsetting sometimes.
It isn't. And I remember this moment as well. Like, it was quite a few years back when I'd been doing one of my first sort of big batches of travel. It was before university, and I took a year, and I just did some travelling on my own. And I remember being in Thailand, and I actually really loved it. I had a great time there, and I remember spending, like all good backpackers do, a load of time on the Koh Sam Road, and I was so familiar with the place, and I loved it. And I remember that feeling like, God, I love this place so much. And then the second thought that I had was, so now I know it's time to leave. I know it's time to leave, like, and experience something new now, And I know that I'll always have that. Like, I'll always have that love, but it's so familiar to me now. I'm ready. I'm ready for the next thing.
And that's the embodying it within you, just knowing that you can always tap into that feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna just go away because you leave the place.
Yeah. And that's where you and I are both at right now. It's like we've got so much love for these experiences that we've been having and for this incredible place and land. It's the right time.
I know. Gotta go back out into the world.
So get back.
I'll be interested because we'll see like when the podcast comes out, but we'll definitely both already be back somewhere else. And it'll be interesting to kind of catch up and see
how we're doing.
Yeah, how we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
This was so fun. Is there any like nuggets of love you want to leave?
Oh, nuggets of love. I think just tune in. You've just got to find the ways to just take time. Everyone deserves taking time to explore themselves, and that can be little things. It can be going out for a lovely walk before you start work on a morning, and just tapping into the nature that's around you. That's beautiful. Give yourself the time to do that. Doesn't have to be these big things that we've been talking about, like climbing mountains and things like that. It's just in your day, make space for the things that you love and the things that give you energy, and respect that time. It's yours.
And be okay with it.
Be okay with it, and be okay with saying no.
Oh, yes.
And you, Brett, any things you'd add?
Yeah, I think it's just really about just tapping into the self, and like, just like allowing yourself to feel what you're experiencing, like feel that love when you notice it, when you're walking in nature, like really just allow it to be within you. And know that you can come back to it at any point. It's always accessible. It's always there. Thanks,
Brett.
This is great. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.